You will die in prison. 10-year-old boy sentenced to life for killing his mother. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harriet Montgomery adjusted her glasses and looked down at the small figure standing before her. Noah Kessler, just 10 years old, stood motionless in his oversized navy blue suit, his expression unnervingly blank as he faced the verdict that would define the rest of his life. In the case of the state of Ohio versus Noah Kessler, this court finds the defendant guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Eleanor Kessler. Judge Montgomery's voice echoed through the hushed courtroom. The defendant is hereby sentenced to life imprisonment. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. For a moment, nothing happened. Noah didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't show any sign that he understood his fate had just been sealed. His small hands remained clasped in front of him, steady and still. It was this very stillness that first caught documentary filmmaker Harper Dell's attention. From her seat in the back row, she watched the boy's face intently, noting the slight twitch at the corner of his right eye, the barely perceptible quickening of his breath when the judge spoke his mother's name. These tiny betrayals of emotion stood in stark contrast to what the media had been reporting for months, that Noah was a child monster, incapable of normal human feelings. Then, just as the guards approached to lead him away, something changed. Noah's composure cracked. His small shoulders began to shake, and suddenly, violently, he was sobbing. Deep, guttural cries that seemed to come from somewhere primal inside him. The sound was jarring, heartbreaking, and profoundly human. "It doesn't make sense," Harper whispered to herself, scribbling frantically in her notebook. The public story painted Noah as a calculating killer who had brutally murdered his mother, a respected university professor in cold blood. But what Harper saw in that courtroom was a terrified child finally breaking under unbearable pressure. Outside the courthouse, the media circus was in full swing. Victor Harmon, the district attorney who had successfully prosecuted the case, stood before a forest of microphones, his expression appropriately grave yet somehow theatrical, as if he were performing rather than speaking. "Today justice has been served," Harmon declared, straightening his tie as cameras flashed. "While this is a tragic case, make no mistake, the evidence was overwhelming and the jury's verdict was just. Noah Kessler may be young, but the calculated nature of his crime showed a disturbing level of premeditation and an absence of remorse that cannot be ignored." Harper watched from the sidelines, studying Harmon's practiced gestures and camera-ready expressions. His political ambitions were hardly a secret. Rumors were already circulating about a run for state office. The conviction of the Oak Ridge Monster, as the press had dubbed Noah, would make a compelling campaign highlight. As the crowd dispersed and the news vans pulled away, Harper remained, watching the courthouse empty. What had really happened in the Kessler home that night? How could a 10-year-old boy commit such a crime? And why had he maintained that eerie composure throughout the trial, only to collapse at the very end? Something about this case didn't add up. The pieces fit too neatly, the narrative too clean, the villain too perfect. A disturbed child, a brutal murder, a community that could sleep soundly knowing justice was served. It felt manufactured. Back in her hotel room that evening, Harper spread her notes across the bed, reconstructing the timeline of events, searching for inconsistencies. She was so absorbed in her work that she almost missed the envelope that had been slid under her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one typed sentence. "You saw what they wanted you to see." Harper's heart raced as she read the words over and over. Someone knew she was digging. Someone was watching. And someone, it seemed, wanted her to dig deeper. What was the truth about Noah Kessler? And how many people were invested in keeping it buried? The morning after the verdict, Harper sat across from District Attorney Victor Harmon in his meticulously arranged office. Awards and framed newspaper headlines adorned the walls, trophies of a career built on high-profile convictions. As Harper set up her camera, she noticed how Harmon subtly adjusted his tie and squared his shoulders the moment the red recording light blinked on. "It was the blood evidence that sealed it," Harmon explained, his voice dropping to a practiced, somber tone. "Noah's fingerprints were on the knife, and he had his mother's blood on his pajamas. But what really convinced the jury was his behavior when the first responders arrived. Harper leaned forward. How so? The officers found him sitting beside his mother's body, completely calm. He didn't cry, didn't seem scared. When they asked what happened, he just said, "She's not moving anymore." No emotion, like he was talking about a broken toy. Harmon paused dramatically, his eyes flicking briefly to the camera. In 20 years of prosecuting, I've never seen a child react that way to trauma. As Harmon recounted the details, Harper observed how his gestures became more emphatic when discussing key evidence, how his voice modulated perfectly between righteous indignation and solemn regret. He wasn't just recalling events, he was performing them. Some have questioned whether a 10-year-old can form the intent required for first-degree murder, Harper noted. Something flickered across Harmon's face, annoyance perhaps, before his professional mask returned. The psychological evaluation was clear. Noah understood exactly what he was doing, the way he cleaned. The knife afterward shows premeditation and awareness of guilt. When the interview concluded, Harmon walked Harper to the door, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. "I know these cases can be emotionally compelling," he said. "But remember, I saw all the evidence. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the correct one." Outside, Harper replayed the conversation in her mind. Harmon had been polished, convincing, and yet something felt rehearsed about his certainty. She found herself wondering what evidence might never have made it to court. Harper's next stop was the juvenile detention facility where Noah was being held until his transfer to a more permanent institution. Despite her credentials and repeated requests, the administration refused her access to the boy. "Court order," the administrator explained flatly. "No media interviews with the minor." As Harper left, the building frustrated, a woman in a beige cardigan approached her in the parking lot. "Ms. Dell, I'm Diane Wells, Noah's teacher." The woman's eyes darted nervously around the parking lot as she spoke. "I saw you at the trial. Did you testify?" Harper asked, not recalling her from the proceedings. "No," Diane replied, her fingers drumming an anxious rhythm against her thigh. "The prosecution didn't call me. Said my testimony wasn't relevant." Her gaze never settled in one place for long. "But I knew Noah better than almost anyone. That boy they described in court? That wasn't him." Harper studied the teacher's face. "What do you mean?" "Noah has a condition, alexithymia. It's a disorder that makes it difficult for him to identify and express emotions. He feels them, but," Diane's voice dropped to a whisper, "he can't show them like other children, or he shows them in ways people misinterpret." "And you told this to the defense?" "I tried, but his court-appointed lawyer barely had time to meet with Noah, let alone build a proper defense." Diane glanced over her shoulder. "Look, there's more to this story than what came out in court. Eleanor Kessler wasn't just a beloved professor. She had conflicts, enemies even." "Why are you telling me this?" Harper asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because someone needs to speak for Noah, and because—" Diane hesitated, then met Harper's eyes directly for the first time. "Because I'm afraid." Before Harper could ask what she meant, Diane pressed a folded paper into her hand and walked quickly away. Harper opened it to find an address and a name: Martin Reynolds, public defender. As Harper drove to her next appointment, she couldn't shake the image of Noah's face in that courtroom, blank until the eye moment when emotion had finally overwhelmed him. Was it possible that his apparent lack of remorse, the very foundation of the prosecution's case, was actually a symptom of a neurological condition? And if the court had gotten that wrong, what else had they missed? Harper spent the following day piecing together a portrait of Eleanor Kessler that grew more contradictory with each interview. The respected professor's colleagues described her as brilliant, dedicated, even groundbreaking in her field of neuropsychology. Her academic rivals begrudgingly acknowledged her intellect while hinting at ruthless ambition. Friends praised her commitment to truth and research ethics, but as Harper dug deeper, cracks appeared in this polished facade. "Eleanor was intense," admitted Dr. Sarah Feldman, a longtime colleague from the psychology department, her voice lowering as if sharing a secret. Brilliant, yes, but there was an edge to her that could cut. She expected perfection, from her students, her colleagues, and especially from herself. Another professor, speaking off the record, was more blunt. She burned bridges, made enemies. You didn't cross Eleanor Kessler and walk away scathed. None of these statements aligned with the saintly victim portrayed during the trial. More puzzling was what Harper heard when she spoke with Eleanor's sister, Margaret. "My sister changed after the divorce," Margaret explained, serving tea in her immaculate living room. "She became more controlled. Everything had to be just so. Noah felt it the most. The poor boy could never quite measure up to her expectations." Harper carefully probed further. "Would you say she had a temper?" Margaret's hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "I wouldn't say that. Eleanor she wouldn't." She stopped, reorganizing her thoughts. "My sister loved Noah in her own way." The qualified statement hung in the air between them. Later that afternoon, Harper visited Oak Ridge University's archives, requesting access to Eleanor's research files. The archivist, an older woman named Beverly, initially seemed hesitant. "Dr. Kessler's recent work is still under review by the department," she explained, peering over her glasses. "Review? For what purpose?" Beverly glanced around before leaning closer. "There were concerns about some of her methodologies. Nothing proven, you understand. But after her death, certain discrepancies came to light. This was new information." "What kind of discrepancies?" "I've already said too much," Beverly replied, straightening up. "But I can give you access to her published papers and grant proposals." Among these documents, Harper discovered that Eleanor had been working on a controversial study involving memory formation and trauma response. The University Ethics Committee had questioned aspects of her research, but she had secured private funding to continue her work outside normal channels. One name appeared repeatedly in the acknowledgments of Eleanor's recent papers: Dr. Maxwell Pierce, listed as a research partner. Yet Harper couldn't recall this name being mentioned during the trial. "Maxwell? He and Eleanor were thick as thieves for years," explained Rebecca Torres, a research assistant who had worked with both of them. "Until they weren't." "What happened between them?" Harper asked. Rebecca hesitated. "No one knows exactly. One day they were collaborating closely. The next day Maxwell was requesting a transfer to a different department. Then, right after Eleanor died, he took an unexpected sabbatical. Some people thought the timing was convenient. Where is he now?" "Teaching at a small college upstate, last I heard. But good luck getting him to talk about Eleanor. After whatever happened between them, he refused to even hear her name." Before leaving the university, Harper used a public computer to search for Dr. Pierce online. His academic profile appeared normal: publications, teaching positions, the usual professional information. But as she scrolled through search results, she noticed something odd. Recent photos of Pierce at conferences and events were disappearing from university websites and academic forums, as if someone were systematically erasing his digital footprint. That evening, Harper's phone chimed with a notification. A social media connection had accepted her request, one of Eleanor's former students. As Harper scrolled through the students' photos, she found one from a department gathering 2 years earlier. In it, Eleanor stood next to a tall, serious-looking man with salt and pepper hair. The caption read, "Dr. K and Dr. P celebrating the grant approval." Harper zoomed in on the man's face, memorizing his features. When she refreshed the page minutes later, the photo had been removed. Someone was watching her investigation. Someone was covering their tracks. And Harper was now certain of one thing. Whatever had happened in the Kessler home that night, the story told in court was incomplete at best, and a calculated fabrication at worst. Chapter 4. Martin Reynolds, Noah Kessler's court-appointed defender, worked from a cramped office above a laundromat. The space was drowning in paperwork, coffee cups, and the unmistakable atmosphere of a system overwhelmed by its caseload. "I had 47 active cases when I was assigned to Noah," Reynolds explained, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. He was younger than Harper expected, perhaps mid-30s, with the exhausted demeanor of someone much older. The DA's office had a team of 5 working the prosecution. That hardly seems fair, Harper observed. Fair? Reynolds let out a bitter laugh. Welcome to American justice. The deck was stacked against that kid from day one. Reynolds pulled a thick file from a precarious stack. Look, I did what I could with the time I had. But Harmon was gunning hard for this conviction. Rumor has it he's eyeing the Attorney General's office. And nothing launches a political career like putting away a child killer. Did you believe Noah was guilty? Reynolds hesitated. What I believed didn't matter. My job was to ensure he got due process. But, Harper pressed, but there were holes in the prosecution's case that never got properly addressed. He flipped through the file. Like this, security camera footage from the Miller's house 3 doors down. It showed an unidentified vehicle parked on the street outside the Kesslers' home around the estimated time of death. A vehicle that was never accounted for. Harper leaned forward. Was this presented at trial? I tried. The judge ruled it inadmissible, said it was too grainy, could have been anyone visiting neighbors. Reynolds's frustration was palpable. But I know what I saw. That car had no reason to be there at 11:30 at night, and left in a hurry. Do you have a copy of this footage? I tried to get one for my files, but when I went back to review the evidence before trial, that particular video had mysteriously disappeared from police archives. Reynolds reached into a drawer, pulling out a printed image. This is the only thing I managed to save, a single frame showing part of the license plate. The image was blurry, but unmistakably showed a partial plate. JH7. Did you follow up on this? Harper asked. With what resources? Reynolds spread his hands in frustration. I requested a search of DMV records for matching plates in the area. Request denied. I asked for additional time to investigate. Request denied. I was swimming upstream against a department that had already decided a 10-year-old was their killer. What about Noah's condition? The alexithymia his teacher mentioned? Reynolds nodded. I tried to introduce that too. The prosecution's psychologist dismissed it as irrelevant, claimed Noah was exhibiting classic sociopathic tendencies, not a processing disorder. Without funds for our own expert witness, he shrugged helplessly. Did Noah ever explain to you what happened that night? That's the thing. He never gave me a straight answer. Just kept saying he was sorry, but he wouldn't, or couldn't, articulate what he was sorry for. Reynolds leaned back in his chair. In my experience, guilty people typically construct elaborate explanations. Noah offered none. What's your theory then? Reynolds glanced at his office door, then lowered his voice. Someone else was in that house that night. Someone Noah is protecting, or someone he's afraid of. But without evidence, he trailed off. As Harper gathered her notes to leave, Reynolds touched her arm. Be careful digging. Into this. This case is sensitive. What do you mean? I mean, I filed 3 motions for additional discovery that were denied without explanation. I mean, evidence went missing. I mean, after the verdict, I was subtly encouraged by the partners at my previous firm to drop any appeal plans. His expression was grave. Someone powerful wants this case closed and forgotten. Outside, Harper's phone rang, an unlisted number. She answered cautiously. Ms. Dell. The voice was male, calm and utterly devoid of emotion. Your inquiries into the Kessler case have become problematic. This matter has been adjudicated to the satisfaction of all relevant parties. Who is this? Harper demanded. The voice continued as if she hadn't spoken. Further investigation serves no productive purpose and may result in unforeseen complications for your career and personal well-being. Consider this a professional courtesy. The call ended. Harper stood frozen on the sidewalk, her heart racing. The threat had been delivered without a single threatening word, a bureaucratic warning from a faceless entity that somehow knew exactly what she was doing. She looked down at the image Reynolds had given. The partial license plate from a car that shouldn't have been there, from footage that shouldn't have disappeared. Whatever truth lay at the heart of the Kessler case, someone was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to keep it buried. The Kessler house sat abandoned at the end of Maple Street, its windows dark and yard overgrown. Yellow police tape now faded to a sickly cream. still clung to portions of the porch. Harper stood at the edge of the property, steeling herself before approaching. This was where it had happened, where Eleanor Kessler had been killed and her son's life had been forever altered. "You won't find much to see in there," called a voice from the neighboring yard. A middle-aged man with a weathered face stood leaning on a rake. "Police cleaned it out pretty good." "Were you here that night?" Harper asked, approaching the fence between the properties. "Patrick Sullivan," the man offered, extending a calloused hand. "And yes, I was, first one there after it happened." Sullivan invited Harper onto his porch, where he recounted hearing a commotion around midnight. Not exactly shouting, more like, I don't know, a thump. Then silence. Too much. Silence. He paused, staring at his hands. "I should have called right then, maybe if I had." "You found them?" Harper prompted gently. "I knocked, got no answer. Door wasn't locked." Sullivan's voice grew quieter. "Found the boy sitting by her. Just sitting there. Didn't seem to register me at all." "Was that unusual for Noah?" Sullivan looked surprised at the question. "For any kid, wouldn't it be? But for Noah specifically?" "Yeah, he was a sensitive boy. Jumpy even." "You knew him well?" "Saw him nearly every day. Eleanor was strict with him." Sullivan's expression darkened. "There were times I heard her through the walls. The way she spoke to that boy, never physical, mind you, but cold. Clinical almost. Like he was one of her experiments." "Did you ever consider reporting it?" Guilt flashed across Sullivan's face. "Thought about it. Should have. But you don't want to. Insert yourself into someone else's family, you know?" He shifted uncomfortably. "That night, though, when the police were questioning me, I didn't mention certain things." "What things?" "Earlier that evening, before dark, I saw a car pull up. Man got out, argued with Eleanor on the porch. Couldn't hear what about, but it was heated." "Did you tell the police?" "Tried to. The detective cut me off, said they already had their suspect." Sullivan's eyes met Harper's. "Never sat right with me." With Sullivan's reluctant permission, Harper entered the Kessler house through the back door. The interior was a time capsule, furniture draped in sheets, kitchen items still in cupboards, a life interrupted. In Noah's bedroom, she found faded dinosaur wallpaper and shelves of books. Nothing seemed out of place until she noticed a loose floorboard near the bed. Underneath was a small metal box containing drawings, dozens of them created by a child's hand but depicting distinctly troubling scenes. A woman with two faces, one smiling, one screaming. The same female figure looming over a small boy. The imagery was ambiguous. Could have been Eleanor. Could have been someone else. Entirely. These weren't the drawings of a budding killer. They were the silent testimony of a frightened child. As Harper carefully replaced the box, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check Eleanor Kessler's will. Changed 1 week before death. Follow the money. Detective Frank." Detective. Dawson agreed to meet Harper at a diner on the outskirts of Oak Ridge, away from the police department. In his 50s, with graying hair and tired eyes, he fidgeted constantly with his wedding ring, a nervous habit that spoke volumes about his state of mind. "I'm not supposed to be talking to you," he said, scanning the nearly empty restaurant. "The department's official position is that the case is closed. Justice served." "Is that your position too, Detective?" Harper asked. Dawson's eyes flickered downward. "I've been a cop for 27 years. You work enough cases, you develop instincts. And my instincts on this one." He trailed off, twisting his ring again. "What didn't make it into your report?" Dawson remained silent for a long moment. There were inconsistencies at the scene. The footprints in the garden bed beneath the kitchen window. Adult-sized. The window itself had marks consistent with being forced. But because there was no obvious theft, we didn't pursue it as a break-in. That seems like a significant oversight. It wasn't my call. Dawson's voice hardened. The brass wanted this wrapped up quickly. A child killer makes for sensational headlines but makes our town look bad. Better to close it fast, show the system works. Even if it doesn't? Dawson didn't answer directly. There was blood spatter analysis that didn't match our reconstruction, and the murder weapon, the kitchen knife, had been wiped clean except for Noah's. Prints on the handle. What 10-year-old thinks to wipe a blade for Prince but leaves his own on the handle? Harper leaned forward. Why didn't you raise these issues at trial? I tried. Bitterness crept into his voice. My full findings were edited before they reached the prosecutor's office. When I objected, I was reminded that my pension was only 2 years away. Harper changed tactics. I received a tip about Eleanor Kessler's will, that it was changed shortly before her death. Something sparked in Dawson's eyes. Where did you hear that? Is it true? Eleanor Kessler's estate was substantial. Life insurance, property, research patents. According to her original will, everything would have gone to Noah, held in trust until he turned 21. Dawson lowered his voice. But a week before her death, she changed the beneficiary to a research foundation controlled by William Camden, the university's dean. That seems suspicious. We thought so too initially, but the new will came with a psychological evaluation suggesting Eleanor had concerns about Noah's mental stability. She apparently feared he might misuse the inheritance. Harper's journalistic instincts flared. May I see a copy of this will? Dawson hesitated, then slid a manila envelope across the table. I shouldn't have this, but something about it never sat right with me. Harper examined the document. The language was standard legal text, but when she reached the signature page, something caught her. Iningdu. The date next to Eleanor's signature had a subtle inconsistency. The ink density on the final digit appeared different, as if it had been altered after the original signing. Has anyone verified the authenticity of this signature? Harper asked. Camden provided notarized confirmation with Noah's confession. There wasn't reason to dig deeper. Dawson paused. At least that's what I was told. As they parted ways, Dawson gripped Harper's arm. Someone powerful wants this story buried. Watch yourself. His eyes held genuine fear. And if you find the truth, be sure it's worth the cost. Later that evening, reviewing her notes, Harper discovered something she'd overlooked. William Camden, the beneficiary of Eleanor's revised will, had authorized the university's contribution to District Attorney Harmon's election fund just 3 months earlier. The connection was circumstantial, but unmistakable, and it raised a chilling question. How many people had conspired to ensure Noah Kessler took the fall for a murder he might not have committed? After 3 days of persistent calls and a threatened lawsuit against the juvenile detention facility, Harper finally secured permission to visit Noah Kessler. The visitation room was sparse and clinical. A metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, and a guard watching through a reinforced window. Noah entered silently, smaller than Harper remembered from the courtroom. His prison uniform hung loosely on his thin frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He sat without looking at her, hands folded neatly on the table. Hello, Noah. I'm Harper Dell. She kept her voice gentle. I'm making a documentary about your case. I'd like to hear your side of the story if you're willing to share it. Noah remained silent, eyes fixed on his hands. Up close, Harper noticed small, methodical scars on his forearms, evidence of self-harm that hadn't been visible in court. I've spoken with your teacher, Ms. Wells. She told me about your condition, how it affects the way you express emotions. A flicker of recognition crossed Noah's face at the mention of his teacher, but still he didn't speak. Noah, I believe there's more to what happened that night than what came out in court. I want to help, but I need you to talk to me. After a long silence, Noah finally raised his eyes to meet hers. They were startlingly adult, deep brown pools carrying a weight no child should bear. She said that I had to be strong like the Popeye, he whispered, his voice cracked from disuse. Who said that? Your mother? Noah's gaze dropped again. He wouldn't answer further questions, retreating into silence so complete it seemed physical. After 30 fruitless minutes, Harper prepared to leave. As she gathered her notes, Noah suddenly spoke again. They said I'd go home if I said I did it. The words tumbled out in a rush. They said it would be better for everyone. Who told you that, Noah? But the moment had passed. The boy's expression closed off again, and he wouldn't or couldn't say more. Outside the visitation room, Harper met with Dr. Samuel Foster, the facility's psychologist who had been working with Noah. His emotional state is complex, Dr. Foster explained, reviewing Noah's file. He exhibits signs of trauma beyond what you'd expect even in these circumstances. There's a protective element to his silence, as if he's guarding a secret. Protecting himself? Harper asked. No. Foster's expression was troubled. Protecting someone else. As Harper signed out at the ICE reception desk, a nurse with graying hair approached. Ms. Dell. The woman glanced nervously at the security cameras. Noah gave me something after your session. Asked me to pass it to you. She slipped a folded paper into Harper's hand, then quickly walked away. Harper waited until she reached her car to unfold it. In a child's uneven handwriting, the note read, "I promise not to tell. She said they would hurt my dad if I told." Harper sat frozen, staring at the paper. The she in the note was ambiguous. Could have been Eleanor, could have been someone else entirely. But the implication was clear. Noah was carrying a burden far heavier than the crime he'd confessed to. As she started her car, Harper made a decision. It was time to find Thomas Kessler, Noah's absent father, the man who had disappeared from his son's life after the arrest, the man Noah might still be trying to protect. What she didn't know was how difficult and dangerous that search would prove to be. Locating Thomas Kessler proved unexpectedly difficult. The man had effectively vanished after his ex-wife's murder, leaving no digital footprint, no forwarding address. It took Harper a week of digging, through property records, vehicle registrations, and social media, before she found a lead. A rental agreement for a small apartment in Millfield, a town just 30 miles from Oak Ridge, under the name Thomas Kent. The apartment building was run down, paint peeling from its facade. Harper knocked on Dr. 3B and waited, heart racing. Footsteps approached, paused. She sensed someone looking through the peephole. "Mr. Kessler, Thomas Kessler, I need to speak with you about your son." The door opened a few inches, secured by a chain. A haggard face appeared in the gap, unshaven, hollow-eyed, but unmistakably the same man from family photos Harper had seen in the Kessler home. "I don't use that name anymore," he said, voice hoarse. "And I don't have a son." "Noah needs your help," Harper persisted. "He's serving a life sentence for a crime I don't believe he committed." Something flickered in Thomas's eyes. Pain, guilt, fear, before his expression hardened. "You should leave. Please." Harper pressed a business card into the gap. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." After a long moment, the door closed, then reopened fully. The apartment beyond was sparsely furnished, but meticulously organized, at odds with Thomas's disheveled appearance. Every surface held precisely arranged items. Canned food lined up by height, books arranged by color, medication bottles in perfect rows. Thomas gestured to a chair, then sat opposite, perched on the edge of his seat like a man, ready to flee. "You think Noah is innocent," he stated flatly. "I think there's more to the story than what came out in court," Harper replied carefully. "Noah gave me a note suggesting he's protecting you." "From what?" "I don't know." Thomas's hands began to tremble. "My son isn't protecting me. He's afraid of me." His voice cracked. "As he should be. Why would Noah fear you?" Thomas stared at a spot on the wall behind Harper. "Eleanor had connections. Powerful people. After we divorced, she threatened to destroy me if I fought for custody. Said her friend could make me disappear." "What? Friend?" "She never used names, just he or him. Someone at the university, I think." Thomas ran a shaking hand through his hair. "When she died, I knew they'd come for me next. Had to run." "So you abandoned your son when he needed you most?" Thomas flinched as if struck. "You don't understand. Her book would have ruined everything." "What book?" "Eleanor was writing something, research findings, university politics, I don't know exactly. She said it would change everything." His eyes darted to the window, then back. "After she died, I tried to find it. It was gone." Harper leaned forward. "Thomas, did you kill Eleanor?" "No." The vehemence in his voice seemed genuine. "But they think I did. They're watching, always watching." "Who is they?" Thomas stood suddenly. "You need to go, now. They'll know you found me." His paranoia was palpable, filling the small room. "They're everywhere." Thomas, please. My son is better off without me, he whispered, moving toward the door. We all are. As Harper left, Thomas pressed a key into her palm. Storage unit. Fairview facility. Number 217. What I could salvage. His eyes were wild with fear. Don't come back here. Don't. Use my name. They'll find you too. That evening, Harper returned to Thomas's apartment with more questions, only to find it completely emptied. The landlord confirmed that Mr. Kent had paid his remaining lease in cash that afternoon and vacated the premises. The man who had abandoned his son once had vanished again, but this time he'd left Harper a thread to pull, and she intended to follow it all the way to the truth. Harper returned to her hotel room that night to find the door ajar. Heart pounding, she pushed it open slowly. Inside, the room had been methodically ransacked, not in the chaotic way of common thieves, but with surgical precision. Her laptop remained untouched, but her notebooks were gone, along with her recorder and backup drives. She called the police, but their response was perfunctory at best. The officer who took her statement seemed disinterested, suggesting it was probably just a random break-in. When Harper mentioned she was investigating the Kessler case, his demeanor shifted subtly. That case is closed, ma'am, he said, not meeting her eyes. Might be best to leave it that way. After he left, Harper sat on the edge of the bed, fighting waves of fear and doubt. Someone was clearly threatened by her investigation, enough to violate her privacy, steal her work, and implicitly threaten her safety. The rational response would be to walk away, but the image of Noah's face, of his small hands with their methodical scars, kept her rooted to the case. Whatever the truth was, it was worth finding. The next morning, Harper visited the Fairview storage facility. Unit 217 was small, secured with a padlock that Thomas's key easily opened. Inside were 3 cardboard boxes, all that remained of Thomas Kessler's former life. The first contained family. Photographs, Thomas, Eleanor, and Noah in happier times. Vacation snapshots, school portraits, Christmas mornings. Harper noted how Eleanor's smile never quite reached her eyes, how her posture remained rigid even in casual settings. The second box held financial documents, bank statements, tax, returns, property records. Nothing immediately revelatory, though Harper took photos of everything for later review. It was the third box that changed everything. Inside was a laptop, its charging cable neatly coiled, and a stack of handwritten journals. Harper powered on the computer, holding her breath. It booted to a password screen. She tried several obvious combinations, Noah's birth date, Eleanor and Thomas's anniversary, before finally succeeding with Orion 217, the name of Noah's favorite constellation combined with the storage unit number. The laptop contained hundreds of emails, between Eleanor and various colleagues, most heavily encrypted, but one folder, labeled simply Project, contained what appeared to be draft chapters of a manuscript. As Harper began to read, a soft knock interrupted her. She froze, then carefully approached the unit's door. A young woman with sharp eyes and a wary expression stood outside. "Are you Harper Dell, the documentarian?" Harper nodded cautiously. "My name is Julia Winters. I was Eleanor Kessler's graduate assistant." The woman glanced nervously over her shoulder. "We need to talk, but not here. I've been followed since I contacted your production company." 20 minutes later, they sat in Julia's car in a busy shopping mall parking lot. Eleanor was writing a book, Julia explained, her fingers tapping anxiously on the steering wheel. Not an academic text, an exposé. She'd discovered financial irregularities in the university's research funding, millions of dollars being funneled through ghost projects into private accounts. Whose accounts? That's the thing. They belonged to a foundation controlled by Dean Camden, but Eleanor believed he was just the front man. She was following the money trail to find who was really behind it. And this connects to her murder how? Julia reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. "This is what I managed to save from her office before the university secured her belongings. It's only a portion of what she was working on, but..." She pressed the drive into Harper's hand. Eleanor coded everything, used initials instead of names, obscured dates and locations. She was paranoid, but now I understand why. As Harper slipped the drive into her pocket, Julia gripped her wrist. You need to know what you're dealing with. A week before she died, Eleanor told me she'd found something that would bring down the entire operation. She was excited, scared. She said, if anything happens to me, the truth is in the patterns. The patterns? I don't know what she meant. But the day after she told me this, my apartment was broken into. Nothing taken, just searched. Like your hotel room. Julia's eyes filled with tears. I should have warned her. Maybe if I had. Harper left with the drive burning a hole in her pocket and a new understanding of the forces aligned against her. Eleanor Kessler hadn't just been a murder victim. She'd been a whistleblower silenced before she could speak. And now Harper was following the same dangerous path. The manuscript fragments on Julia's flash drive confirmed Harper's worst suspicions. Eleanor Kessler had been investigating a complex network of financial fraud within Oak Ridge, University's research department. The documents detailed how legitimate research grants were being diverted through shell companies and returned as private donations to specific projects that existed largely on paper. At the center of Eleanor's investigation was a pharmaceutical company called Neurova, which had funded several of the university's neuroscience initiatives. According to Eleanor's notes, Neurova had been testing experimental memory-altering drugs through unofficial channels, circumventing proper FDA protocols. Most disturbing was a document showing substantial campaign donations from Neurova to District Attorney Victor Harmon's Political Action Committee. The donations had begun 2 years earlier, but had increased dramatically in the months before Eleanor's murder. Harper was so engrossed in the files that she almost missed the knock on her new hotel room door. She froze, remembering the break-in. Silently, she approached the peephole. A man she didn't recognize stood in the hallway, tall, distinguished, with salt and pepper hair. With a jolt, Harper realized it was Dr. Maxwell Pierce, the colleague who had disappeared after Eleanor's death. Ms. Dell, he said quietly when she opened the door. We need to talk. May I come in? Pierce declined Harper's offer of coffee, his eyes constantly drifting to the windows. I won't stay long. It's not safe. For either of us. You worked closely with Eleanor Kessler, Harper began. Yes, until I realized what she was uncovering. Pierce's hands trembled slightly. Eleanor was brilliant but reckless. She believed exposing the truth was worth any risk. And you didn't? I have children, Ms. Dell. When the threat started, I chose their safety over the truth. I'm not proud of it, but there it is. He met her gaze directly. Eleanor wouldn't back down, not even when they came after Noah. Harper's pulse quickened. What do you mean, came after Noah? The boy was enrolled in a special program at school, supposedly for gifted children. Eleanor discovered it was actually a small-scale clinical trial, testing memory-enhancing drugs on minors without parental consent. Noah was one of the test subjects. That's illegal. Extremely. And Eleanor had proof, documentation, blood test results. She was going to expose everything. Pierce ran a hand through his hair. When she told me her plans, I begged her to reconsider. Warned her these people wouldn't hesitate to destroy her. These people, you mean Dean Camden? Pierce gave a bitter laugh. Camden's just the public face. The money comes from higher up, people with connections in politics, law enforcement, pharmaceuticals. The kind of people who make problems disappear. Like Eleanor. Pierce nodded grimly. Her murder wasn't a domestic tragedy. It was a professional hit, made to look like something a disturbed child might do. And Noah confessed. They knew he would. That's the insidious part of what they did to him. Those drugs affected his memory formation, his emotional processing. The perfect patsy, a child with documented behavioral issues who couldn't properly express his emotions or clearly remember events. Harper felt sick. Why are you telling me this now? Pierce stood to leave. Because you're making the same dangerous waves Eleanor did. You're asking questions that have already destroyed other people. His expression was haunted. I couldn't save her. Maybe I can save you. By warning me off? By telling you to be smarter than she was. Don't confront these people directly. Find irrefutable evidence, then release it all at once publicly. Give them no time to react. As he reached the door, Harper asked, "Do you know Thomas Kessler, Eleanor's ex-husband?" A strange expression crossed Pierce's face. Thomas was complicated. Eleanor kept him at a distance after they separated, said he had become unstable. Unstable how? I don't know details, but I do know this. The night Eleanor died, Thomas called me in a panic, said something had gone terribly wrong, that they were coming for him next. Pierce paused. I dismissed it as paranoia at the time. Now I wonder if he knew more than any of us realized. After Pierce left, Harper stared at the scattered pages of Eleanor's manuscript, mind racing. If Noah had been drugged without his knowledge, if his emotional responses had been chemically altered, then his entire trial had been a mockery of justice. But to prove it, she would need to confront the one person who seemed to be at the nexus of everything. William Camden, Dean of Oak Ridge University. Harper knew confronting William Camden directly would be dangerous, possibly even reckless. She needed leverage, a public setting, and witnesses. She found her solution in Adam Clark, an investigative reporter for the Oak Ridge Gazette, who had written several critical pieces about the university's expanding influence in the town. Camden won't talk to me directly anymore, Clark explained over coffee, but he can't avoid the press conference for the new research center tomorrow. We'll catch him there with cameras rolling. The following morning, Camden stood at a podium outside the gleaming new Nerova Neuroscience Center, beaming as he addressed the small crowd of reporters and university officials. He was tall and imposing, with carefully styled silver hair and the easy confidence of a man accustomed to power. This partnership represents the future of neurological research, he announced. With Nerova's generous funding, Oak Ridge University will pioneer treatments for conditions previously thought untreatable. During the question period, Clark raised his hand. Dean Camden, can you comment on allegations that Nerova has been conducting unauthorized drug trials through university programs, specifically targeting minors? A flash of something, anger, fear, crossed Camden's face before his practiced smile returned. Absolutely not. Those rumors are completely unfounded. Harper stepped forward then, holding up a document from Eleanor's files. Then how do you explain this report showing elevated levels of experimental compounds in blood samples from students in the Cognitive Enhancement Program? Program that Noah Kessler was enrolled in before his mother's murder? The crowd of reporters stirred, sensing a story breaking before them. Camden's smile vanished entirely. This press conference is over, he announced, turning to leave. One more question, Harper called after him. Did Eleanor Kessler threaten to expose the illegal drug trials before she was killed? Is that why you became the beneficiary of her estate just 1 week before her death? Camden froze, then slowly turned back. His expression had transformed completely, the polished administrator replaced by something harder, colder. My office, he said quietly. Now, inside the pristine academic building, Camden led Harper and Clark to a wood-paneled sanctuary, lined with leather-bound books and academic awards. Once the door closed, his composure crumbled. You have no idea what you're dealing with, he said, voice shaking. None at all. Then enlighten us, Harper replied. To her surprise, Camden sank into his chair and buried his face in his hands. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. The program started as legitimate research, cognitive enhancement for students with learning disabilities. But when Nerova got involved, everything changed. How so? Clark pressed, recording the conversation. They pushed for faster results, fewer controls, started targeting specific students for more experimental protocols. Camden looked up, his expression haunted. Eleanor discovered what was happening. Threatened to expose everything. So you had her killed, Harper said bluntly. No! Camden's denial seemed genuinely horrified. I tried to reason with her, offered her control of a new ethical research program, but she wouldn't budge, said the whole system was corrupt and she was going public. What about her will? The one mysteriously changed to benefit your foundation. She approached me about that herself, said if anything happened to her, the foundation could use her estate to fund oversight committees, prevent future abuses. Camden's eyes pleaded for understanding. I never thought, never imagined, that she'd be murdered a week later. Harper's voice was skeptical. It wasn't me, Camden insisted. But yes, I know who wanted her silenced. The same people who've been pressuring me for years. Who? Camden hesitated. There was an investigator, Charles Henley. He uncovered similar issues years ago, tried to blow the whistle. He disappeared. Car accident, they said. But his body was never found. And the same people were behind Eleanor's death. I believe so. Camden seemed to age before their eyes. After she died, I was told to cooperate with the investigation to ensure it followed the right path. I knew what that meant. You helped frame a 10-year-old boy, Harper said, disgust evident in her voice. I told myself Noah would be treated leniently because of his age. Shame colored Camden's features. I was a coward. Still am. As they left Camden's office, Clark was buzzing with excitement. This is it. The break we needed. With Camden's confession, we can blow this whole thing open. But Harper wasn't celebrating. Something felt wrong. Camden's confession had come too easily, his remorse too perfect. Was he truly a reluctant accomplice seeking redemption, or was this another carefully constructed performance? The answer came that evening, when the first edition of the Oak Ridge Gazette hit the stands with the headline, University Dean Admits Corruption Cover-Up. Below it, a subheading, Questions Raised About Kessler. Murder case? The story had barely begun to circulate when Harper received a text message from an unknown number. You were warned. Now watch what happens. The warning proved prescient. By midnight, Harper's source at the hospital called to inform her that Dean Camden had been admitted with symptoms of a stroke. By morning, the university had issued a statement claiming Camden was suffering from stress-induced psychosis, and that his statements to the press were delusional ramblings without factual basis. More disturbingly, when Harper tried to contact Adam Clark, she discovered he'd been suspended from the Gazette pending an investigation into journalistic ethics violations. The online version of his article had vanished, replaced by an editor's note apologizing for unsubstantiated claims. The system was closing ranks, just as Dr. Pierce had warned. But Camden's mention of Dr. Maxwell Pierce sent Harper down a new investigative path. If Pierce had been in surgery in another state the night of the murder, as hospital records indicated, he couldn't have killed Eleanor. Yet his hasty departure from Oak Ridge remained suspicious. While cross-checking Pierce's alibi, Harper discovered something odd. The attending nurse listed on his surgical record was Rebecca Torres, the same name as the research assistant who had first mentioned Pierce to Harper. The coincidence seemed too perfect. A call to the hospital confirmed Harper's suspicion. There was no Rebecca Torres employed there during the time in question. Pierce's alibi had been fabricated. But if Pierce had created a false alibi, why hadn't the police discovered this during their investigation? The answer seemed increasingly clear, because they hadn't been looking for any suspect other than, Noah. This revelation led Harper back to Eleanor's teacher, Diane Wells. During their brief conversation, Wells had shown nervousness that Harper had attributed to general anxiety. Now, with fresh perspective, Harper wondered if that nervousness had a more specific cause. Re-examining her notes, Harper found inconsistencies in Wells's statements. She had claimed to know Noah well, yet school records showed she'd only been his teacher for 3 months before the murder. More significantly, when Harper dug into Wells's employment history, she discovered that before becoming a teacher, Diane, Wells had worked as a research assistant at Oak Ridge University, specifically in Eleanor Kessler's department. This connection had never emerged during the trial. Why would Wells conceal her prior relationship with the victim? When Harper arrived at Oak Ridge Elementary to confront Wells, the school secretary informed her that the teacher had abruptly resigned that morning, citing personal reasons. At Wells's apartment, Harper found the door unlocked and the rooms hastily emptied. On the kitchen counter sat a laptop, open and running. On the screen was an email addressed to Harper. I don't know who to trust, not even you. But Noah deserves the truth. Look deeper into Eleanor's relationship with Thomas. It wasn't what everyone thinks. The email's timestamp showed it had been sent just 30 minutes earlier. Wells had wanted Harper to find it. But why not contact her directly? Why stage this dramatic disappearance? As Harper pondered these questions, her phone rang. It was Dr. Foster from the Juvenile Detention Center. "Something's happened with Noah," he said, his voice tight with concern. "He's asking for you. Says he's ready to tell you everything." Harper's pulse quickened. After weeks of investigation, she was finally going to hear the truth from the one person who had witnessed Eleanor's death, the child who had confessed to killing her. But as Harper would soon discover, Noah's truth would upend everything she thought she knew about the case. Harper raced to the Juvenile Detention Center, only to be met by chaos. A facility-wide lockdown was in progress, with security personnel rushing through corridors and medical staff gathered outside Noah's room. "What happened?" Harper demanded, finding Dr. Foster in the hallway. "Someone tampered with, Noah's medication," Foster explained, his face grave. "His regular antidepressant was replaced with something else. If the nurse hadn't noticed a slight difference in the pill's color." "Is he all right?" "Physically, yes. We caught it before he took it. But he's shaken." Foster lowered his voice. "This wasn't random, Harper. Someone has access to this facility, to our medical supplies. Someone wants Noah silenced." After a tense hour of waiting, heightened security protocols were implemented, and Harper was finally allowed to see Noah. The boy sat on his bed, knees pulled to his chest, more alert than she had seen him before. "You came," he said simply. "Of course I did," Harper replied, sitting beside him. "Noah, do you know who might have wanted to hurt you?" Instead of answering directly, Noah asked, "Did you find my dad?" The question caught Harper off guard. "Yes, briefly. He was afraid." Noah nodded as if this confirmed something. "He always was. Afraid of her, afraid of them, afraid of everything." "Your mother?" "She wasn't like other moms," Noah said, picking at a thread on his blanket. "She watched me all the time, wrote things down, gave me special vitamins that made my head feel fuzzy. The experimental drugs," Harper realized. "Did she know they were testing things on you?" "At first, no. But then she found out. She was really angry." Noah's voice trembled. "That's when the woman started visiting more." "What woman, Noah?" "The one who brought presents. Mom's friend from before. They talked a lot, but then they would fight." "Was it Ms. Wells, your teacher?" Noah didn't confirm or deny, simply continued his story. "The night it happened, I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard voices downstairs, Mom and the woman, and then, you." Trailed off, eyes distant. Harper waited, heart pounding. "And then Dad came," Noah finally whispered. "I heard his car. He has a special sound to his keychain. It jingles with this little metal star I gave him once. And his steps on the porch. I always knew when it was him." Harper remembered. "The storage unit key with its small star-shaped attachment. You heard your father arrive?" Noah nodded. There was shouting. Mom was really mad that he came. I snuck down and watched from the stairs. They were all in the kitchen. The timeline Harper had constructed suddenly shifted. Thomas Kessler had been at the scene, a fact he'd concealed from her. And apparently so had a third person, a woman who remained unnamed. Before Noah could continue, an emergency alarm blared through the facility. A voice over the intercom ordered an immediate evacuation. "Fire in the East Wing," a guard announced, rushing into the room. "We have to move everyone now." In the confusion of the evacuation, Harper was separated from Noah. It was only later, watching the news report about the electrical fire at the detention center, that she realized the convenient timing. Just as Noah was finally opening up, something had interrupted them. Back in her hotel room, Harper received a call from Meredith Collins, a social worker who had evaluated Noah after his arrest. "I found something you should hear," Collins said. An early interview with Noah that wasn't included in the trial evidence. The next morning, Harper listened to the recording Collins provided. Noah's small voice described the woman who visited Mommy and how they always fought. In the background, Harper detected sounds she hadn't noticed before. A distinctive jingling of keys, heavy footsteps, the ticking of an old-fashioned clock. The same sounds Noah had just described as his father's signature arrival. The pieces were aligning, But the picture they formed was darker and more complex than Harper had imagined. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure Noah took the blame for Eleanor's murder, and that same someone was now systematically removing anyone who might reveal the truth. The question was, who stood to benefit most from Eleanor's death and Noah's conviction? Harper's investigation had reached a critical point. With Detective Dawson's help, now fully committed to uncovering the truth, she began assembling a comprehensive timeline of the events surrounding Eleanor's murder. The detective's remorse over his role in Noah's conviction had transformed into determination to right a terrible wrong. "Diane Wells is our missing piece," Dawson said, pinning her photograph to the evidence board in his home office, a space now dedicated to reopening the Kessler case. Her connection to Eleanor goes beyond what she admitted. They weren't just colleagues. Through personnel records Dawson still had access to, they discovered that Diane Wells had abruptly switched careers 5 years earlier, abandoning a promising research position at the university to become an elementary school teacher. More significantly, she had specifically requested a position at Oak Ridge Elementary, the school Noah attended. She positioned herself in Noah's life deliberately, Harper realized. But why? The breakthrough came when Dawson obtained a search warrant for Wells's hastily abandoned apartment. Behind a loose baseboard in her bedroom closet, they found a shoebox containing photographs, letters, and a handwritten journal. The photographs revealed the truth Harper had been seeking. Eleanor and Diane together at conferences, on vacations, embracing intimately. They had been lovers, their relationship stretching back years before Eleanor's marriage to Thomas. Their relationship continued after Eleanor married, Dawson noted, examining date stamps on the photos, and after Noah was born. In one photograph taken at what appeared to be a university function, Harper noticed something that sent a chill through her. Thomas Kessler standing in the background, watching Eleanor and Diane with an unreadable expression. The journal entries painted a picture of obsession and jealousy. Diane had been devastated when Eleanor chose to marry Thomas, but had maintained their relationship in secret. The entries grew increasingly bitter after Eleanor's divorce, when she still refused to publicly acknowledge their relationship. "She uses me when it's convenient." One entry. "Read, she'll never choose me over her precious reputation, her precious research." The final entries were the most disturbing, describing Diane's growing resentment of Eleanor's control over Noah. "She treats him like another experiment. He deserves better. We could give him better, a real family, real love, but she'll never let him go. Never let either of us go." Yet despite the jealousy and anger expressed in the journal, there was no explicit threat, no confession to murder, only the tormented writings of a woman caught in an impossible situation. "This gives Wells motive," Dawson acknowledged. "But something doesn't add up. If she killed Eleanor out of jealousy, why position herself in Noah's life beforehand? Why disappear now instead of after the murder? And what about Thomas?" Harper added. "He was there that night. Noah confirmed it." As they debated these questions, Harper's phone rang, a secure line Dawson had provided. It was Dr. Foster from the detention center. "Noah's asking for you again," he said urgently. "He says he's remembered something important about the night his mother died." "Is he safe?" Harper asked, remembering the tampering incident. "We've moved him to a secure location. I'll text you the address." Foster paused. "Harper, he mentioned his father. Said he needs to tell you what really happened between Thomas and Eleanor that night." After ending the call, Harper turned to find Dawson staring at the evidence board, his expression transformed by sudden realization. "All this time," he said quietly, "we've been working under the assumption that Eleanor was the target. What if she wasn't?" "What do you mean?" "The real target was Noah, or rather, his testimony." Dawson pointed to the photo with Thomas in the background. "Look at his expression. That's not the look of a man watching his wife with another woman. That's the look of someone who's realized he's been betrayed on a much deeper level." Harper felt the pieces clicking into place. The rushed trial, the convenient confession, the missing evidence, the attempts to silence everyone connected to the case. "We need to get to Noah," she said urgently, before someone else does. But as they would soon discover, they were already too late. The final truth about what happened in the Kessler home that night was far more devastating than either of them had imagined. The safe house was a small cabin on the outskirts of town, nestled among pine trees that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Dr. Foster greeted Harper and Detective Dawson with visible relief, leading them to a back room where Noah sat by a window, watching the fading light. He looked different now, calmer, more present. When he turned to face them, Harper saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Clarity. "I'm ready," Noah said simply. Harper sat across from him, recorder in hand. "Take your time, Noah. Just tell us what you remember." Noah didn't speak immediately. Instead, he traced patterns on the wooden table with his finger, organizing his thoughts. "Dad used to say that if anything bad ever happened to him, it would be my fault," he began softly. He'd say, "You're the only thing keeping me alive, buddy." He'd hold his breath until his face turned red to show me. What would happen if I ever told Mom about their fights? Harper felt her throat tighten. This wasn't just a confession. It was the unraveling of years of manipulation. The night Mom died, she was working late in her study. Ms. Wells, Diane, came over. They were arguing about me, about the medicine I was taking at school. Noah's voice remained steady, detached, as if he were recounting someone else's story. Diane wanted Mom to stop the tests, said they were hurting me. "And then your father arrived?" Dawson prompted gently. Noah nodded. "I heard his keychain with the star. His heavy steps. I knew it was him, even though he wasn't supposed to visit anymore." "What happened next, Noah?" "I watched from the stairs. Dad was really angry. He said Mom's book would ruin everything, his job, his reputation, that she couldn't publish it." Noah's hands trembled slightly. "Mom laughed at him, said it was too late, that people deserved to know what the university was doing to kids like me." Harper exchanged a glance with Dawson. Eleanor hadn't just been exposing financial fraud. She'd discovered her own son was being used as a test subject and was determined to stop it. "Dad grabbed her," Noah continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Diane tried to stop him, but he pushed her away. She hit her head on the counter and didn't get up. Then Dad and Mom were fighting by the sink. There was a knife." Noah closed his eyes, breathing deeply before continuing. "It happened so fast. Mom was on the floor, there was so much blood. Dad looked surprised, like he didn't mean to do it." "What did he do then?" Harper asked gently. "He saw me on the stairs. He was crying. He said," Noah swallowed hard, "he said that if I told anyone what happened, he would kill himself. That it would be my fault, just like he always said. That we had to protect each other." "So you agreed to take the blame," Dawson concluded. Noah nodded. "Dad said it would only be for a little while. That because I was a kid, they wouldn't punish me too badly. He made me practice what to say to the police." A single tear rolled down his cheek. "He said he would fix everything, that he just needed time. But he never came back for you," Harper said softly. "He promised he would. Every day I waited." Noah's voice finally broke. "He said that he would come back, and I believed him. I always believed him." The painful silence that followed was broken by Dr. Foster, who had been listening from the doorway. "The psychological manipulation is textbook." Thomas convinced Noah that his father's life depended on his silence, for a child who already struggled to process emotions. Normally, it was the perfect trap. Later, as Noah slept under sedation, Harper and Dawson sat on the cabin's porch, processing what they'd learned. Thomas Kessler killed his ex-wife in a moment of rage, then manipulated his emotionally vulnerable son into taking the blame, Dawson summarized. Bitterly. And while Noah has spent 2 years in detention, Thomas has been free. Not just free, Harper added, thinking of the evidence they'd gathered. He's living under a new identity in Brazil. New job, new family. He never intended to come back for Noah. Dawson's phone rang. The district attorney's office responding to their emergency petition to vacate Noah's conviction. The conversation was brief, but definitive. "They're reopening the case," he announced after hanging up. "Noah will be released into protective custody pending the new investigation. And there's an international weren't being prepared for Thomas Kessler. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Harper was overwhelmed by the cost of this truth. A child's innocence sacrificed, his trust destroyed by the person who should have protected him most. 2 weeks later, Harper visited Noah one last time before completing her documentary. He was staying with a foster family now, slowly adjusting to freedom, to therapy, to a normal life that would never truly be normal again. "What happens to my dad when they find him?" he asked as they walked through a park near his new home. Harper considered sugarcoating her answer, but decided Noah deserved honesty. "He'll go to prison for a very long time." Noah nodded, eyes fixed on the distance. "I still don't understand why he did it. Not the killing. That was an accident. But why he let me take the blame. Some people can only love themselves, Noah. Your father's actions weren't because you failed him. They were because he failed you." As they reached a small pond, Noah skimmed a stone across its surface. "He said he would come back," he said, his voice hollow. "And I waited, but he never came." In those simple words lay the devastating truth of the Kessler case. Not just that a man had killed his ex-wife in a moment of anger, but that he had condemned his own son to save himself. The lie had protected only its creator, while destroying the child who had believed in it. And that, perhaps, was the greatest crime of all.